Well, hey, good morning, King's Church. So honored to have my friend Lane Clevenger here with us this morning. Today's going to be a special Sunday. And if you haven't met Lane, don't know Lane, he's a pastor, an elder at our church, Christ Church of Joplin, here in Joplin, Missouri. He is a financial advisor. Him and his wife, Abby, have built two incredible businesses. They have beautiful kids that are growing up, serving the Lord. And Lane's been a dear friend for many years. And so I'm excited to be here together and learn from you and kind of get the wisdom from above about finances. What do you say?
Thanks for having me, man. This is a privilege to be here. Appreciate the chance to chat. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, man, I know a lot of people in our church are excited to hear more about how do we manage what God's put in our hands? How do we be faithful to the Lord with the finances that He's entrusted to us? Questions like, what do I do with debt? What do I do with savings? What do I do with retirement? How do I prepare for my future? I know a lot of people that I talk to frequently, man, they're saying, man, I'm strapped. Like I don't even know how I would do $100 a month towards retirement, but I know that day's coming. And so I want to get to all that.
Sure.
But I would love to start just asking about mindsets and motivations. What are some mindsets about money? Because we know that where your mind goes, where your thought goes, that's where your life goes, right? Like if I have the wrong mindset about money, nothing else is going to work. If I have the wrong motivation with money, nothing else is going to work. So like, what are some wrong mindsets that you've seen people have with money, some wrong motivations, and then maybe some positive or good mindsets and motivations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think maybe the biggest wrong mindset that you would run into, especially as it pertains to money, is just thinking that this money is mine, And so in contrast to that, I think biblically the framework of stewardship and just really not just the belief that everything belongs to Jesus, but then like living that out. If that's the mindset through which you're seeing your financial life and you're committed to say, everything I have belongs to Jesus, it will change the way you make all kinds of decisions, certainly including, financial ones. But I think stewardship begins with that mindset of saying, okay, God has given me something and my hands are open. The money that He's giving me from the job that He's giving me is putting me in a position to take care of myself or my family, whatever your situation is. But then, He's not just giving that to me, but for the benefit of others and certainly for His kingdom. So I think if we see life through that lens and make financial decisions through the lens of stewardship, it will change a lot.
Yeah, great.
And I think, maybe connected to that would be ideas that we would commonly run into, again, around kind of like what's the order or the priority of how do I, what do I get in line first? What's the most important thing? And that becomes a challenge because everyone's situation's a little bit different. And I know you and I were chatting earlier. I know you guys have just talked about kind of that idea of the tithe, but I do think there's something, again, kind of turning mindset into action, that willingness to say, this all belongs to God. I'm going to give this back to Him as like a commitment and an act of faithfulness. That I think does start to change everything that happens afterwards.
Yeah. I love that principle of stewardship, because oftentimes we think, I'll give the 10% to God and then the 90% I just get to have a party with, And
Sure. Yeah.
It all belongs to the Lord, it's all His. And there's stewardship isn't just generosity. That's a part of stewardship. Mm-hmm. But maybe talk about what are some other implications of stewardship? Like, what does it look like to be faithful with what's in your hands?
Yeah, well, you're right to bring that up, because actually, if we zoom out, stewardship is like the fact that we're breathing, right? God's given us life. He's given us the resource of a job, maybe children, a spouse, and everything He gives us, a house to live in or an apartment that we've rented, that there's a stewardship perspective to that, where it's like, okay, God's given me this. How do I bless the kingdom of God with this thing?
Yeah.
And so it's like everything from my time as a stewardship conversation, right? Like if I look at my calendar, my week or my month or my year, how am I stewarding the time God's given me to serve him and make sure that he's first in all those things? And again, today we're talking about finances, but that's just like one thing on the list.
Yeah. Yeah. So good, man. What are some things, you're obviously a pastor and a financial advisor, you're a business owner. What are some things that you see Christians do wrong, or maybe unholy motivations when it comes to wealth building and preparing for their financial future? So preparing for retirement, preparing for kids' education, all those are good things.
Yeah.
But sometimes our motive can be wrong in them. Like,
sure.
how would you speak to that?
Yeah, that's a very it's a difficult conversation that I've come against, philosophically a few times in my life. I've been doing this for almost 23 years now, and so certainly that idea of planning for the future, which I think is okay and a biblical thing. Yeah. Like it's not a bad thing to have a cupboard, right, with some extra groceries in it for tomorrow. Yeah. Like that's not sinful in and of itself. And so it's okay to have a savings account that's preparing you for the hot water heater that might break down. It's okay to have a retirement account that's saying, hey, at some point in my life, I might not be able to physically work. And so preparing for those things is a good thing. The challenge is we just can't put too much hope in that.
Yes.
Right? So again, the spectrum's wide. It can be the groceries in your cupboard or your retirement account. If you put your faith in that, that's where the mess up happens. Yeah. And it becomes something that can become an idol, clearly, or it can become an obsession, like, I have to prepare for my own retirement, or I have to pay for my kids' education, or I have to have, something that is not a bad thing in and of itself can become the thing. And again, kind of in our office, thankfully I work with a good team, and we share values, Christian values, when it comes to these things. So one of the things we talk about is, we make our plans, but God orders our steps.
So good.
So at the end of the day, even if that savings account that I've got for the hot water heater, if God asks me to give it to somebody else for a need, I better be prepared mentally, emotionally, and in action to give that money away. Yeah. So if it's mine and it's for my benefit only, then I've missed the point. Yeah. So there's a back and forth there that you have to keep bringing into check. All these things, they're not bad in and of themselves, but they can quickly become idols. And I think that's why Jesus warns, he gives some pretty strong warnings to folks that, the rich young ruler and that it's so easy for the things that we have to become our God and our idols. And
And I love that you're saying that as someone who helps people build wealth. You're not saying that as like, just give everything you possibly, just give. You're saying, no, you actually can't give. You can't be generous if you haven't filled your cupboard. If the neighbor comes over and says, can I have a loaf of bread? You can't give them a loaf of bread if you don't have a loaf of bread.
Right.
So I love that back and forth of, sometimes God calls you to save and invest, and sometimes God says, clear the account out and give it to the kingdom. Yep. And it reminds me of Proverbs, where it says that in the wise man, his house is filled with storehouses of grain and oil, but the fool devours all that he has. Yeah. Right? It's like, speak to that maybe. Speak to budgeting. Sure. Whether you have a $30,000 a year income, $100,000 a year income. There was actually a study done by Barna where they said that they asked people, how much money would you need to have to be rich? And they asked people who made $30,000 a year, and the people who made $30,000 a year said, if I made $70,000 a year, I'd be rich. Yeah. They asked people who made $50,000 a year, and they said, if I make $100,000 a year, I'll be rich. They asked the top income earners, they said, how much do you have to be rich? And they said, people with $5 million in assets are rich. Yeah. The line just keeps moving.
It's relative.
It's totally relative.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, and I think that's something that all of us have to come to grips with is that making more money is not the answer to your problems.
Yeah.
Now, and I promise that most of us would tend to think that that would actually fix something. But if you can't figure it out today, more money is not the solution. Just ask all the lottery winners that make these huge sums of money and then boom, it's gone tomorrow. So it's clearly not, more income is not actually the solution. It is a better framework for understanding what you're doing with what you have. And there's an idea connected to that I think is something that, again, I don't know if this is a Western problem so much as it is just a human problem, but like the idea of delayed gratification, of like being willing to set something aside for a future benefit is something that I think that Christians can model that well. And I think the church should be, we should be showing the rest of the world how to do that in a way, again, like we were talking earlier, is not putting too much faith in that thing, but it's saying, no, it's a good thing to set this aside and know we're going to use this, next week or next year or in 10 years. And so that delayed gratification is something that I do find is the reason which, some of us, we have $1 in our pocket and we want to figure out how to spend $2. So I have, it's interesting as I've had, we've been raising kids now. Our oldest is in college, but you just see in a child a different kinds of, inclinations. Some kids are inclined to kind of squirrel away money when they get the birthday cash or whatever, and then other kids are ready to go to the mall, like as soon as the dollar hits their pocket. And so there is some of that to just our human nature, but I think all of us need to be teaching ourselves how do we set something aside for the future, and in kind of all different categories.
I love it. I heard somebody say that money promises to do for you all the things that God promised to do for you. So you're talking about idolatry. So money tells you you can be free if you have me. But God says freedom comes in the presence of the Lord.
Good.
Money says you'll be secure if you have me. But God says you're secure when you're hidden in the shadow of my wings. Like money says you'll have power if you have me. But God says, no, there's power in my spirit, right? Like money promises all these things that only God can give to us.
That's great. I love it.
Even that inclination of spending more than I have. Maybe speak to that for a minute. So the consumer debt.
Sure.
The credit card debt. We used to do things like layaway, right, where you pay for it before you get it. But now we're saying, no, I want it now, and I'll pay for it later.
Right.
Like maybe speak to that mindset and the impact that has on your financial world.
Well, it's true, and it's definitely like the kind of the keeping up with the Joneses, right? Like there's expectations that society puts on us, and we all fall into that trap of saying, oh, well, I've just graduated from college, I've got a good job, of course I have to go buy a new car, and then all of a sudden you're strapped, and your percentage of your income that you're putting towards that is just totally out of balance. And so we just can't let ourselves be driven by those kinds of motivation. It can really mess us up. And the people, I think the other kind of phrase or word that's connected to that would be contentment. So alongside, I was saying delayed gratification, but maybe even more fundamental and important is like contentment, like godly contentment. Like I'm happy with what God has given me, and I'm not going to assume just because there's a little bit of cash in the bank still that like I'm ready for the next thing, and I'm not betting on the raise I might get next year to buy the house today. Like you just can't make decisions that way, and I think that puts us in positions where you can't be generous because there isn't, if 50% of your income is going to pay your mortgage, you're in trouble. That's a tough spot to be in. And if you're trying to live out some of these principles of stewardship and generosity, you are going to have a hard time with that. Like you might have to make some bigger fundamental decisions that would put you in a position to be able to do that.
So I hear you saying some mindsets and motivations. So you're talking about stewardship, managing what God's put in my hands in a way that's faithful to Him. generosity. Like the proverb says that the world of the generous gets larger and larger, and the world of the stingy gets smaller and smaller. That it's more blessed to give than to receive. Like there's a blessing on generosity. There's a joy in generosity.
Yeah.
You talked about that. You talked about idolatry, that we can put our hope in money instead of in God, even our hope in our savings.
Yep.
This delayed gratification and contentment, like some of these foundational things. Maybe talk more specifically about, okay, practically what does it look like? You get all those foundations in place, which you can't build the house without the right foundation,
Yep.
right? Like if we try and build the savings or build the retirement and don't get those things in place, we're gonna build our life on the sand.
Yep.
And whatever we build is just going to get washed away, right? Even if you get wealthy in this world, you meet Jesus face to face, and it's like, man, I wasted my life, right? Like, but okay, you get those in place. Practically, maybe speak to the 35-year-old person. They've got 2-3 kids at home. Money's already tight. They already feel behind on retirement, struggling to save, trying to honor God. What does that person do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a tough spot. I mean, I've been there. Now in my 40s, those years in your 30s with young children, I had the delusion for a while. I thought as soon as I can quit buying diapers, I'll financially be back on track. Yeah. And then we got done with that, and it was just something else, So I do think there's a different phase to every life, but particularly in your 30s, I mean, you are thinking a lot about, like, I am potentially behind already.
Yeah.
For where I quote wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I think letting go of that is pretty important. But again, I would say if you were the 35-year-old, I'd just ask you some questions, making sure that you're doing the right thing when it comes to giving. And challenging that idea of generosity, and making sure that there's a heart towards that. But the very practical things for most folks in that life stage would just be, coming back around to that list of monthly expenses and saying, okay, what is it? Where are the things on this list that we don't need?
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about like needs, wants, and wishes.
Okay.
And so, the needs are the needs. But there's typically some things financially in that wants and wishes category, and oftentimes we're jumping to, debt and financial commitments over here in the wishes category that get us out of order, and we're trying to figure out, oh man, we can't buy groceries. So if you think about those expenses and kind of think about which camp they fall in, typically most of us have some things we could get rid of, and it might be something that you enjoy, but it just might not be the best thing for you, and might certainly not be the best thing for your budget.
Yeah. So the needs are survival, roof over my head, food in my stomach. Could be beans and rice. That doesn't have to be fancy.
Sure.
Food, right?
Utility bill. You need to keep the lights on. That kind of stuff.
Okay. Wants are, okay, I need a car to get me from point A to point B, which could cost $2,500, but I want that car that costs $40,000.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wishes, is that the vacation? Is that what fits in that?
Yeah. Wishes would be kind of the fluff,
Okay.
I really, and for me, again, everyone might have a different list, but, it might be something like, I hope to be able to help my child when they get married.
Okay.
So that would be maybe a wish on somebody's list. Yeah, something that's like, I want to be able to do that down the road.
Okay.
But then some people, a jet ski might be their wish,
Yeah.
and it jumps in front of some of these other things,
Yeah.
So, and again, doesn't mean the jet skis, it's not evil. It's just that you put it in the wrong place, and now it's winning, and now we can't be generous because something got out of order.
Yeah.
So I think that's the gut check for folks often, is just to kind of look back at that list and say, where are we at? What's God calling us to in all this? And
I was going to ask if you could buy a jet ski and then let me use it all the time. Actually, I would love it if you did that for me.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
I don't have a jet ski, just full disclosure.
You don't have a jet ski, dang it. Let me know when you get one.
Or a boat, for that matter. But
we got some work to do. So I read the other day, average car payment for a new car in America is $700 a month. The average car payment in general, I think, was $450 or $500 a month. Average eating out budget for a family of four is $500 a month. So not groceries, not needs, but it's the want. I want somebody else to cook it for me, somebody else to do all the work, and I just rock up to the drive-thru. And so you cut those two things alone, you've got $1,000 a month back in your pocket.
Yeah.
Speak to that person who maybe is looking at their list and saying, I feel like I've cut all the wishes and I've cut all the wants, and I'm looking at my needs and there's still not enough. Is that a moment of like, okay, there's drastic life change needed? Like, you may have to downsize the car. You may need to pick up a second job. You may need to, is that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think, and those are real kind of probably more pastoral conversations that we would have, right? Where, if this is your situation, you're sitting down, and again, I think it's important. Money becomes a very private thing.
Yeah.
And I think at some point it's good for us to find someone in our lives that we trust enough to say, hey, will you help me look at this?
Yep.
Make sure I'm not crazy here. I think all these things are needs. I think I've cleaned up my list. Will you double check my work here?
Yeah.
And I think that's important too, that vulnerability. And within community and within a church family, I mean, certainly we hope that folks would be able to find that.
Yeah.
Someone that they're able to look to and say, I trust this person. I'm going to go to them and share this stuff and ask for some feedback. And, I think all of us would say that kind of community is what we want.
Yeah.
I think that's the standard God calls us to.
Yeah.
Is a willingness to be open about it, and then
it's huge
to be challenged to say, hey, yeah, this looks like you might want to, I believe in you. You could, maybe a new job is in your future.
Yeah.
Like maybe that's what we're finding out here is like, hey, buckle down for 6 months and maybe we should help you look for something where we could see the top line improve so that some of these other numbers would look a little better.
Yeah, that's so helpful. I mean, I had almost no financial literacy, for most of my life. And the last 15 years, I feel like I've been playing catch up, just asking everyone I can, everything I can, and trying to understand, how do I think about this biblically, and how do I think about it wisely? How do I be a faithful steward with whatever it is God puts in our hands?
Yeah.
And that one of the breakthrough moments in our life was, getting our budget open with somebody else and saying, all right, I know it looks ugly, but show me all the spots where you think we could change or do something different. And it really did make a significant difference.
Yeah. It's so good and so true. And I think all of us need that feedback. Yeah. And I do think it's like other areas of Christian life. Like I think God blesses that willingness to be vulnerable. Yeah. And it's not easy, and sometimes it's embarrassing. Yeah. For someone to know you did what?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You spent how much?
Yeah.
But it is again, in the right godly relationship where you're trusting someone, I think that can be a very good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Speak, Lane, to your thoughts on debt. Not talking about mortgage debt, but talking about credit card debt, student loan debt, the impact that debt can have on your financial world. And maybe that person who's saying, okay, I've got $30,000 of student loan debt. I've got $10,000 on a credit card. I want to begin investing for retirement. I want to give to God. I want to do all these things. Where do they start?
It's a good question. And again, I think it's very practically, I would look at that list and say, where's the highest interest rate? And probably start really buckling down. Dave Ramsey, everyone kind of knows his shtick, but he's a big debt reduction guy. And I would say, particularly when it comes to student debt, credit card debt, vehicle debt, those are liabilities that will really kind of grab a hold of you and not let go. Yep. And so if you're not tenacious about a plan to get rid of that kind of debt, you'll forever be kind of like feeling like you're digging out of a hole. Yeah. And again, I understand those can be overwhelming numbers for some folks. They think about, gosh, I'll never, but it's just not true. I mean, you can come up with a plan. Yeah. It may mean rice and beans for a season. It may mean that you're really scrimping for a while, but there are ways out of those situations, but it doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you have that $500 a month car payment, or you're eating out that $500 a month or $300 a month, and you can reduce all those things immediately, the ability to snowball that debt and knock it down, it's pretty incredible.
It is. It really is. And those stories are fun to hear, and we've heard them. And I think that, again, there's not a lack of hope in those situations. It's sometimes just a lack of confidence in a plan.
Yeah.
So hopefully folks can feel like, man, if I get some help, I'm going to get my hands around this and knock it out.
Yeah. Speak to that 20-year-old, 22 years old, just graduated college, has some student loan debt, probably getting their first career job, making, 40 to 60 a year. What do you wish someone would have told you at that age, or how would you counsel that person, like, make the most of this opportunity and get ahead of this thing?
This is silly, but I think the biggest, most likely mistake for that person is a vehicle. Paying for an asset that is depreciating in value, and you're paying with it with borrowed money, and you're moving backwards on both fronts. And that alone, and again, I get it. We drove the junker through college, through high school. It barely made it through college. And we finally got that job, and we're like, all right, I'm going to get me a car. And again, I think you can buy a great car in the United States for $5 to $10 grand. It's not as cool as somebody else's car, but that'll always be the case, I promise. So it's just, again, being satisfied and content with something, and understanding that it might not be what you first thought you wanted, but it probably could very likely be in your best interest. So that's probably the biggest thing I see, is honestly making a quick decision on a vehicle. And then I'd say be careful with how much of your income you would put towards housing. So the difference between buying a house or even renting, just paying attention to the percentage of your income that you're putting towards getting that roof over your head. That kind of balance needs, that ratio, if you will, needs to be in check. And that then will kind of help make other things.
Is there a range?
I mean, 30%'s awesome. 30 to 45%'s great. Well, I should say 30 would be the number for just your payment. So either your mortgage payment or your actual rent payment. You could add on top of that, utilities and all that other stuff, that taxes.
So your escrow is 30%. And then up to 45% to add on everything else. Maintenance, repairs, projects.
Got it.
But you don't want to be hitting that 50% number for your home.
I don't, because it destroys your margin. So, the more compressed you can keep that, then everything else is going to have a little bit more room to breathe.
Okay. Yeah. Man, Lane, this is so helpful. Thanks for the conversation and your time. A couple more questions for you.
Yeah.
That person who maybe they just became an empty nester, or they're entering those retirement years, how can they make the most of this opportunity and this season of life?
Yeah, I think financially, a lot of those folks are in a unique situation, especially those that are a part of the church and hopefully, plugged into what you guys are doing as a church and a community. And I think about the word legacy when I think about that age group. So I heard somebody say not too long ago that, after 10 years of you passing away, the only people that are going to remember you are your kids.
Wow.
And I think that's probably true for a lot of folks, but I think the church gives us a unique opportunity to really extend that impact and legacy. Not very many of us are going to have our names on the side of the new building at the university. So I'm not thinking that kind of legacy, but more so like what impact can we have in this kind of, this last run around the track, this last lap. What does impact look like? And again, that may be a financial conversation. It may be certainly an investment of time and energy and effort into these younger generations coming behind. But I think financially, as we're talking today, it's looking at that last stage of life through that lens. So, what does generosity look like for us, and what does,
Yeah.
Even what we would get into what we call estate planning, that conversation of, what happens to this stuff when I'm dead and gone. And so you can make some fun decisions in that moment that really do have some cool lasting impact and some kingdom impact. So those are conversations that are really fun, that we enjoy having, and are different for everyone. It's not always just about giving away a bunch of money when you die, but it is saying, like, where's my investment going to be personally in this last kind of, again, stage of life. But
what are some of those potential legacy decisions, kingdom decisions? What do you mean? Like, there's some fun ways to do that. What are some of those things?
Well, yeah, I would say, there's fun things from a tax perspective. So I always like it if there's a way for me to give something to the church instead of to Uncle Sam. For me, that's a win.
Yeah.
So that's where the financial geek in me comes out and gets a little excited. So if we can tell someone, hey, why wouldn't you give this away rather than paying the taxes or whatever it would be? So there's some things like that I consider fun because I'm a numbers nerd.
Yeah.
And then again, impact today would be just looking at kind of that balance sheet and again that mindset. I think of our friend John Lamferman, and kind of one of the fathers among us certainly, and his transition to quote retirement, where he would say, I'm not retired.
Yeah.
My dad has kind of done that same thing. I'm seeing Tim Chambers now too, as he's moved from being full-time pastor. What's going to define you? What's your life going to be about? And continuing to invest in people, and not just making it, my retirement is I'm floating away and I can't volunteer in kids ministry anymore because I'm retired.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the opposite of that, and saying, no, this is my moment to really invest and be in the middle of it all. And so, empty nesters, that's the challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to look in the camera and say, if you have breath in your lungs, if you are not dead, God is not done with you.
There you go.
And if you are gray-haired at King's Church, you are beloved and you are needed.
Absolutely.
And we have a generation of young people that they need your voice, they need your investment, they need your discipleship, they need your prayers. And so listen, if you got time on your hands, I've got a spot and a position for you to make an impact in a young person's life. And so, man, I love that you said that.
Yeah.
And I love what you're talking about with kingdom impact. I mean, Rebecca and I, we've made our will, and we've put King's Church in there as a part of it, because we know we want to pass things on to our kids, but we also, how cool would it be to build wealth, and then when I'm dead, I'm still a part of planting churches, and I'm part of kingdom impact, So that's really cool to hear you say that.
Yeah.
Lane, to get to that point, it does take some upfront investment. It takes some wise decisions early in life or throughout life to get to the point where you can be radically generous, with what God's given to you, and leave that more significant legacy in people's lives. One of the things that's kind of struck me is the power of compounding interest. Mm-hmm. I think it's called the eighth wonder of the world, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And even, driving here today, I was looking up, just some kind of geeking out on some numbers. And I think it was, if you put $500 away each month for 40 years on a 12% interest rate, I think it's like $4.6 million or something.
It'd be a good number.
Yeah, it's a big number.
Yeah.
Talk to maybe that 20-year-old, that 30-year-old, that 40-year-old, like the power of compounding interest, why it matters to start young.
Yeah. So the cool thing about what's happening there with compounding interest is you're earning money on earnings. So it's kind of a fun thing, but if you turn $1 into $1.05, next year you get to make money on that 5 cents of interest you earned last year. Yeah. So if you do that year over year over year, it's amazing what's happening 20 years down the road as you're earning money on money that you didn't have to do anything to get. It just built inside there. So that's what's happening in all kinds of things. So again, kind of the 101 there would be like, if you have access or opportunity to participate in a retirement plan at work, with my financial planning hat on, I would say, please take full advantage of that. There's likely going to be some sort of match, which is absolutely like free money. It's a raise that's happening inside that account.
Yeah.
Do it, as the old Ronco guys used to say, set it and forget it.
Yeah.
Just put it in there, and your income your budget will readjust, whether it's 2 or 3%. And then one thing we're really encouraging folks to consider there, if we're sitting down one-on-one, is like increase that number each year. So, get to where you're saving into your retirement account just a little bit more each year as a percentage of your income.
Yeah.
And you'll be amazed 5 or 10 years how much you're able to save. But if you do that incrementally, it will feel less drastic and painful.
Yeah.
So, but that, I would say, do that alongside. Don't neglect a commitment to what Tim Chambers had kind of banged into my head. He used to say a life of increasing generosity.
Yes.
So we never want to put a cap on what we're giving. And again, don't let it become like the categories where it's like, oh, this is the only thing I can give away, whether it's 10 or 12 or 15%.
Yeah.
Make sure that that your generosity is increasing even as you're thinking about preparing and saving for other things. I think those things you have to hold in balance, but we can't give up on generosity just for the purpose of saving for the future.
Yeah. Man, you said a lot about generosity today. I know that's not just something you say. I know it's something you live with your life. It's flowing out of you. I mean, I'm just asking you questions about retirement, and somehow you're always coming back to how can I give more money to the kingdom?
Yeah.
And I think that's just the work of God in your heart, and you've tasted of it's more blessed to give than to receive. You've experienced that joy.
Yeah.
But what's the motive behind that? What's the heart behind that makes you so passionate about generosity?
Well, I think it is definitely that understanding and commitment to know that God has put something in my hand to give away. So, it's the difference between seeing, you think about being open-handed or closed-handed.
Wow.
Like if I'm white-knuckled with my time, with my resources, with my money, then I'm missing the whole point.
Wow.
So if I'm open-handed, then it's like every day or every week. And, these conversations we've had over the years with Abby and I together, and even with our children at points, like, God's put this in our hands to give away. Like we're the conduit.
Yeah.
So it wasn't meant to live here.
Yeah.
It's just here for a moment. Where's this supposed to go? And so there is a fun to that,
Yeah.
There's a joy in that process of, wanting to understand, like, God, is this an opportunity? Is this something you're asking us to do?
Yeah.
And I will say, just on that point, like, my dad was one he's a very generous guy. And he held real tightly to that principle of, like, don't let your left hand know what the right does, kind of like giving in secret, And we live in the same town and been in Joplin grew up here, been here my whole life. In my older years, I started to hear of my dad's generosity, like in my 30s, and would meet someone and, oh man, your dad's been so generous. I'm like, I didn't know he even knew you,
Yeah.
And so that's challenged me too, to not just be a generous giver, but then like to know that the fruit of that is going to be seen in generations. And
Wow.
It doesn't take our voice. I don't have to tell you necessarily even who I've given to for it to have its effect.
Yeah.
And that's so cool to me.
Wow.
Just the way that could happen over time,
Man, tell me about different investment options. So I can go download an app and start investing in random stocks. I could buy Bitcoin. That'd be fun. I could get a Roth IRA, a 401k. I could do a 529 for my kids' college education. Like, just give me the basic plan. Somebody's getting started. Where should they start investing?
Yeah. We would start with just the clarification that investing as an idea is different than going to the casino.
Yeah.
So I do think sometimes our culture gets that a little mixed up, especially younger folks. They're getting into again, get that first job in your 20s and you think, I'm going to go buy some stock and watch this thing blow up, or buy Bitcoin and become rich in 2 years. So this is not this isn't a casino play where we're betting some money to hope to make a bunch. This is a long-term concept that says, if we're prudent and do a good job here and we set aside these dollars, down the road, 10, 15, 20, 40 years down the road, this is going to be something meaningful. And so we would see investing through that lens, first of all. And then also, again, the idea of stewardship. So the fact that as I make a decision to set something aside for the future, it is actually a stewardship decision. So, and I'm not saying this is completely, an improper decision, but at some point, if a person's accumulating the cash or money, if they are continually just putting that in their mattress or in a can in the backyard, at some point, they're probably making a bad stewardship decision. Right. So God's actually calls us to say, what did you do with what I gave you? And so investing is an opportunity to say, I'm going to try to steward this well. So that's the lens we kind of see this through. But as far as the function of what you're doing when you're investing, buying stocks, bonds, mutual funds, those would be kind of the primary investment vehicles. And then that's happening under the umbrella of typically a 401k at work, an IRA or a Roth IRA. Those are accounts that you would manage on your own or with the help of an advisor. 529 accounts that you would set money aside to save for a child's education. So all different kinds of structure or umbrellas we can put. Fundamentally, you're doing the same kinds of things, and then at different levels of risk. So, there's a risk and reward scale that kind of lives and breathes in our economy. And again, that's part of a process of a conversation of saying what's appropriate for you, kind of given your life stage, where you're at, what you're doing, what you want to achieve long term. So, is that helpful?
So I think what you're saying is there's different kind of packages, different options. The big idea, again, is stewardship. How do I multiply? How do I be faithful with what God's put in my hands? It's not a get-rich-quick scheme, because the person who tries to get rich quick is going to end up poor, right? It's not going to work, but it's just a faithfulness thing. And you're saying, there's different packages. So there's some tax advantages to a Roth that are different than a 401k, that are different from that 529 for a college fund. Maybe I think what you're saying, Lane, is that if you have a job that's going to match your retirement, just do your investing through them at first.
Please.
If you don't have that, maybe you're self-employed, maybe you're contracted or whatever, are you saying open a Roth?
A Roth is a great opportunity to save money on a tax preferred basis for your financial future. So love the Roth. And again, I don't want this to, I don't know if you're trying to, you want me to turn this into a commercial real quick?
I was going to get there eventually, but you could do it now. It's easier to slip it in.
I'm joking. But a lot of 401k plans now have a Roth option. So you could choose to, at work, put that money that you're saving into a Roth bucket, so to speak, and kind of have the same impact. But the Roth is a cool tool. Fundamentally, whether you use a Roth or a traditional IRA kind of depends a lot on your tax bracket. So husband and wife, kind of what your joint income looks like might drive that decision. But all else being equal, the Roth is a great tool and a good umbrella to have over those stocks, bonds, mutual funds.
And people just need to be educated, need to know, all right, what does that mean? There's going to be a penalty if I pull it out early. There's going to be a certain kind of parameter that I have to live within if I do that. The 529, the investing for your kids' education, private school, could be college, could be anything in there. You told me recently about a law that came out that makes that a little more appealing for building wealth for your kids.
It's kind of a cool new just little trick they added to the 529. So again, a 529 account, you're saving money for your kids' education. So K through 12, higher education, could be even trade school.
Okay.
And everyone tends to ask, well, what if my kid doesn't end up going to school or going to college, or maybe they don't need that money, they get a scholarship.
Yep.
So there's a new law that says we can take those dollars and turn the 529 into a Roth for that child.
Okay.
So it's kind of cool from a tax perspective. There's some benefit to the 529 on the front end for whoever's contributing it, and then that would then become a real neat thing to pass on to your kid in the form of a Roth that would then grow through their lifetime and could be fairly substantial, at their retirement age.
Yeah.
So neat little planning opportunity there with the 529s that's pretty new.
And if somebody says, okay, I want to do it, I want to start planning for my future, I want to get a Roth or a 401k or do the 529, I know there are apps like Robinhood, there are other apps that you can download to just start investing on your own. Would you recommend that path, or would you say, man, no, just get started with somebody who can kind of hold your hand from day one and show you the right moves?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that kind of depends on the person and their kind of inclination towards these things.
Okay.
If you're inclined toward it and kind of have that geeky mentality like me, then you might want to be a DIY, get in there and do it yourself for a while, get going. But at some point, I think the services of a financial planner are helpful just to help you see. We all have blind spots, right? So it's making sure that you're aware of all the tax advantages and pitfalls of different plans and strategies, and kind of seeing that bigger picture and the long term. And that's certainly where kind of the idea of a fiduciary is someone who is legally obligated to act in your best interest. You want to find someone who acts as a fiduciary to really help you take those next steps.
Okay. Man, this has been amazing. Thanks for your time. Any last thing you'd want to encourage people with, area of finances, financial management, anything like that?
Yeah, man, I just would say it all belongs to God. And again, I think the other thing that I've come to appreciate, it's good to have a plan, but hold that plan loosely and know that God orders your steps. And at the end of the day, whatever He wants is what's best. And I'm excited for you guys. It's been fun. Been to Kings. It's been a minute, but we've snuck in a couple times to your Sunday morning. So excited for what you guys are building. And I think having these kinds of conversations are, I hope, going to build faith in you guys as a church, and bear fruit in the fact that a generous community is what we see in the New Testament. That's the church. It's a group of people that's taking care of one another, and that means we've got to be generous with one another and with the community, and be ready to say yes to God when He asks us to jump in.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks so much, Lane. I mean, you and Abby are such an example and inspiration. You are kingdom people. You're godly people. You're incredible parents. I mean, you've built wonderful businesses, very successful, and yet you've always kept your hands open to the Lord. And so, last thing I would just want to ask, if somebody wants to connect with Clevenger Financial, if they want help with their finances, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Sure. Probably the easiest thing to say here would just be our website. So clevengerfinancial.com.
Cool.
Go there and you can connect with us. It's easy to find the tabs.
Yeah.
So,
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your time, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.